Good morning, Team Alabama. We are ready for more of the Lottery Rose. We are ready for Chapter 4 on page 52. Our main character is Georgie Burgess, and he is now at a new school with his rose bush and Sister Mary Angela. And he's looking for that perfect spot to plant that rose bush. Let's see if he finds it today. Chapter 4. Please find it on your Chromebook and read along with me. The next morning, Georgie was not able to eat his breakfast. Timothy noticed after a time that Georgie's food was untouched and that his eyes had a tired look in them. "I guess you don't feel so good, huh, Georgie?" he asked as they walked away from the breakfast table together. "I feel okay," Georgie answered. He knew that he didn't feel okay. But he also knew that he didn't want to talk about his tiredness or his headache. He had other things to think about that morning. Sister Mary Angela called for him to come to her office in mid-morning. "Georgie, I've been thinking about that rose bush all night. Will you listen to what I am suggesting and try to understand?" A sly plan began to take shape in Georgie's mind. It was not quite a lie. Almost, but not quite. And it would get Sister to stop talking about the rose bush until other plans came through. "Yes, Sister," he said meekly, and with so mild a face that she looked relieved. "I've been thinking of so many possibilities for your bush, and the entrance to our building at one side of the steps is one place where there is plenty of room and where every visitor would see and admire it." She looked at Georgie hopefully. "Yes, ma'am," he said. Sister Mary Angela continued even more enthusiastically. "Then, of course, I wondered why you and Timothy might not cultivate a flower garden together, a big plot to brighten up things in the midst of the boys' vegetable garden. I'm pretty sure Timothy would be glad to take on such a project. He likes you, Georgie." Georgie nodded slowly, and Tim and Sister Mary Angela's eyes smiled at him. "Of course, I like the idea of the bush being right outside your window. But then if you don't, we'll skip that possibility. But there's a very special place I'll give you if you want it, and that's beside the statue of the Blessed Mother, out under the golden rain trees in the corner of our lawn. Your rose would look lovely there, Georgie, red blooms against the white marble. Can't you see them in your mind?" Georgie looked at her with the unblinking look that he had given Mrs. Ames when he lied about losing the book. "I'll have to think about these places, Sister." He made his voice sound as if he agreed with much of what she had said. "Of course, it would be foolish to decide in a rush. Why don't you look around at these places that I've suggested? Take your time. The rose bush has waited this long. I guess another day or two won't matter." He saw that Sister Mary Angela looked relieved as he walked with her towards the door of her office, and then he went outside and made his plans for a visit to the house across the street. Okay, what is Georgie going to do with that rose bush? Might ask a couple questions and put that in your notes right now on your Google Doc. He waited until afternoon when he saw the lady with the golden braids working in her garden beside a bent little man who, according to Timothy, was old Eddie, Mrs. Harper's gardener. Georgie didn't quite have the courage to face the lady who might scalp a strange boy that she discovered in her garden. He decided upon a less dangerous approach. Only that morning he and Timothy had glimpsed a stout brown woman busily wiping down some windows, while an even stouter and younger woman sprawled in one of the lawn chairs and watched. "That's Amanda," Timothy had said, pointing out the younger woman. "She's supposed to be the little boy's nurse, but I don't know. I think that the grandfather is more of a nurse than she is. We call her Coca-Cola Amanda because she drinks Coke all day. That's why she's so fat, I guess." Timothy laughed a little at his own gossip. "The other lady is Rosita, and she's a housekeeper, and she's Mexican. Rosita's all right. She bakes cookies for us sometimes." And so Georgie went first to see Rosita that afternoon. She gasped slightly when she opened the kitchen door and saw Georgie with his rose bush. "My goodness, little boy, whatever happened to you?" she asked, and then she noticed the rose bush, and her white teeth showed up nicely in her smile. "I don't think we need a rose bush right now," she told him. "Could I talk to the lady that owns this garden?" Georgie asked timidly. Timidly might be a great word to add to your vocab list. It's a little shyly and a little softly. Rosita shook her head. No, no, I don't think so. Mrs. Harper is very busy, and I am pretty sure that she'd not like it if we bothered her. She stepped inside to a table and came out immediately with an iced cupcake in her hand. Would you like this? She asked kindly. Georgie shook his head. No, I don't feel like eating. When do you think I could talk to the lady out in the garden? Rosita's forehead folded into many wrinkles. I don't know, child. You see, Mrs. Harper lost a boy about your age just a year ago. Rosita shook her head and her face was sad. She ain't up to talking much to other little boys right now. Georgie didn't move. He stood there, staring up at her, and his stare seemed to make Rosita nervous. Why don't you go around in front of the screen porch? Mr. Collier is out there. He's our little boy's grandfather. Why don't you go around and speak to him? She asked. Georgie had the feeling that she was anxious to be rid of him. Okay, let's add a few facts. Rosita is the cook in Mrs. Harper's kitchen, and he tries to ask her for some information to talk to Mrs. Harper, and she says no, but she's nice about it and hands him a cupcake. And then there's a lady that's kind of like supposed to be the babysitter of a little boy, and her name's Amanda, or Coca-Cola Amanda. So those are facts we can add. And we know that the grandfather's name is Mr. Collier. And so Rosita says, go talk to Grandpa or Mr. Collier and see what he says about this, that Mrs. Harper lost a son, and Timothy had told him that. So she's pretty sad about losing her own child and probably doesn't want to see another little boy about the same age. We're on page 56. As he rounded the corner of the house, Georgie saw beyond the heavy iron gate at the edge of the lawn a sloping path that led down to a lake which lay sparkling like a looking glass in the sunlight. There were trees here and there on both sides of the path, and halfway down to the lake there was a wide old tree like one that he had often looked at in his flower book. Miss Ames told him once that it was a banyan tree, and he was pleased that he remembered the name. When he found the porch, he knocked at the screen door, and a man's pleasant voice asked him to come inside. The voice belonged to a slender old man with silver gray hair and a beard that matched. He sat on a long chair with his feet stretched out before him and with pillows and books all around. A small boy with curly blonde hair and blue eyes that somehow looked lost, all alone, sat close to the old man's side. Well, are you a peddler, young man? Are you selling rose bushes? The man asked as soon as Georgie stepped inside. Georgie shook his head. I'm not selling it. I just want to plant it in your garden. He noticed a worried look coming over the old man's face, much like the look that came on Miss Ames's face when Georgie returned to school after a bad beating. He expected to hear the words so many people said when they looked at him for the first time. What happened? Who hurt you? But the little boy's grandfather didn't ask the words that Georgie expected. He seemed to be busy with some thoughts for a minute, and then he smiled. I'm afraid there isn't a chance of your planting the rose bush here. This garden belongs to my daughter, and she's very particular about choosing the plants that she wants in it anyway. Shouldn't you plant it somewhere near you so that you can tend to it? No, it has to be here. This is the right place for it. Maybe you haven't looked far enough. By the way, do you live at the school across the street? I've lived there from yesterday. So you're a new boy. Do any of the sisters know that you've brought your bush over here? No. Georgie rested his awkward parcel on the terrazzo floor of the porch. Where did you find your bush then? The grandfather asked after a pause. I didn't find it. I had a ticket that won it at a grocery store. It had some numbers on it that made them win the bush to me. Georgie changed the subject suddenly as he became interested in the child resting against the grandfather's side. What's the little boy's name? He asked. His name is actually Robert, but we call him Robin. What is yours? Georgie, but I like Robin better. Yes, it's a nice name for a young child, and little Robin will always be young. What makes you say that? Don't he grow right? The grandfather ran his hand across the child's blonde hair, and his face was grave when he looked up at Georgie again. No, Robin doesn't grow as he should. He's 5 years old, and he can say only a few words. All the boys over at school know that, so I think I should tell you too, but we love Robin very much. And when he and I meet any of the boys on our walks, they never fail to speak nicely to him. That pleases me very much." Georgie put out his hand and touched Robin's foot gently. "Will he learn to read when he goes to school?" he asked. "No." "I can't either. I've been to school, but I ain't ever learned to read." The grandfather turned away from Robin and looked for a long time at his caller. "You've been hurt, Georgie. Were you in an accident?" Here it was, the same old question that everybody asked him, and any minute there would be more, maybe a lot more. "No, I just got in a fight with some big kids. It must have been a very bad one." The grandfather, whose name was Hugh Collier, shook his head. "I've seen other children hurt the way you are, but their hurts didn't come from schoolground fights. Grown-up people hurt those children." "Steve didn't hurt me," Georgie said, and then stopped quickly in sudden fright because he had mentioned that name. Hugh Collier shook his head. "No, I suppose not." He looked at Georgie, and there was a frown on his face. Georgie felt uneasy, and finally he said, "You going to let me plant my bush here?" "I'm sorry, Georgie, but I have to say no. There are plenty of other places for your bush." "There ain't neither any other place," Georgie interrupted him in a sudden fury. "You're a dumb old and you don't know what you're talking about." His voice broke, half sobbing and half screaming. "All the same, Georgie, we have to face it. You must find another place for your bush. If we allow you to plant it here, other boys will want to come over and plant everything from sunflowers to cabbages." "I don't want to talk to you anymore, not to nobody." And Georgie ran around the house, back towards the school, choking with his tears. Rosita came out on the back porch, and Georgie heard her say, "What on earth?" But he didn't speak or look at her. Okay, Team Alabama, we're going to stop there. It's on page 60. Add a few questions now. What does Georgie do? They've told him no. What do you think he's going to do? Let's see if we can figure this out. Okay, go ahead and add 2 questions, and we will pick up more of the lottery rose tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day.